Hi guys, welcome everyone to Evolution of Gaming 2014. I'm in Richard Warner. I'm from Interxion, so we put on the event with the help of the Three Beards and thanks to this great panel. So I won't bore you for too long, but basically what we do, we're a European data center company. Sounds a little bit boring, but we work a lot with gaming companies, and our partners are like Internap. And we basically enable our customers, which are the gaming companies, to get their content out to all their great customers around the world. So that's kind of our bag. I won't talk for too long, but our site's based just down the road in Brick Lane. So if anyone wants to come and check out what we do, let me know, and we're more than happy to show you and host you guys. But anyway, like I said, these are the real people you want to see tonight. So I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to pass you over to Mike. And again, just want to thank all you guys for coming out tonight. And again, the panel and the Three Beards for helping put this together. So thank you, guys.
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the second Evolution of Gaming event. I'm your host for the evening, Michael Hobson from Three Beards. I'll just give you a bit of a rundown from what happened last time. We did an event 2 years ago with a panel discussion. We had Michael Acton-Smith of Mind Candy, Alice Taylor of Makey Lab, Craig Fletcher of Multiplay, Dave Green of BAFTA Games, and the ghost of Peter Molyneux, as he cancelled about an hour before the event, so which was very out of character, I thought. This time around, the last time we discussed the sort of evolution of gaming from the past to the present. This time around, we're going to discuss the evolution of gaming from now into the future. Before we kick off and before I introduce the panel, we've got a bit of a competition going tonight, courtesy of Interxion. I believe they will be judging the winner based on the most interesting tweet. Is that right, Rich?
Interesting and getting into debate.
Cool, okay. And it needs to include the hashtag EOG14 and the @Interxion Twitter handle in the middle there. And the winner will receive a Nexus 7 tablet. No, you're disqualified already. So yeah, we've got a fantastic panel here tonight. I'll just introduce them briefly and they'll let us know a bit about themselves. From left to right, we have Julia Hardy, video games and tech journalist from Sky News Sunrise. We have Dan Maher, who worked on Sony, Xbox, and now has a podcast with Explosive Allen Productions. We have Haitham Rowley, IT Director of Square Enix. And we have Louise Shannon, Curator of Digital at the Victorian Album Museum. So, to start off, I'm just going to ask you to sort of introduce yourselves a bit more, tell us a bit more about what you do, and let us know, 1, the first game you ever played, and 2, what you're playing now.
Okay, so I had a bit of a weird journey into coming into gaming. I got a job on a music channel on Sky, as you do, just randomly. And they ended up having a show on there that was going to be sort of like games and music, and it was also about like film, and I was into games, so we ended up kind of just reviewing lots of different stuff, and that was sort of my first little step into coming into gaming. And then I've had lots of different sort of presenting jobs over the years. But I suppose when I kind of went full force into gaming I was hosting a show called Game Face, which was on Bravo, which was this wonderful yet bizarre link and clip show, which had oranges being juiced behind my head for some reason. I never found out why. If anyone ever saw it, it was really bizarre. So I kind of got into it that way. And then I've had lots of different freelance jobs. If any of you guys are thinking about going into gaming, one freelance job is never, ever, ever enough. You need at least 6, 5? Something like that. You need a few of them on the go. So I've been kind of doing that. I've recently started, at Sky News, doing like a weekly sort of gaming and tech thing, which I do, which is sort of part of Sky, like Swipe and Sunrise, which is quite fun. I probably most recently just finished a job for BAFTA, which was cool. I was hosting all the content for that, for the challenge show, which was fun. It was long. I drank some really weird cocktails that made me feel a bit ill, but that was good fun. So the job's quite varied. It's quite interesting. Yeah, so wait, what was it? What was I? I've lost where I'm going.
First game.
First game.
And what you're playing now.
First game, I think probably I got really super excited about was probably Sonic the Hedgehog 2. It was the first game I think I ever was genuinely like, oh my God, this game is coming out. The first of many games that I got a bit excited about. And it was, you know, one of those days where, of course, you couldn't save your games. My parents wouldn't let me have a games console. They also wouldn't let me get my ears pierced. So I think all of these things, as a parent, you should take note of, that maybe just let your kid do that if they're quite stubborn. And, you know, you'd like play it from start to finish. You had to leave the console on, go pause it, go make a sandwich, come back, try and finish it. You could never do it. It was always really difficult. So that was the first game that I ever really played. The one that probably got me into gaming, like in a really serious way, was a point-and-click game called Day of the Tentacle, which I played with my friend Farah, whose parents let her play video games. Again, they also let us have Dominoes and drink Coca-Cola. It was really exciting going around her house. And played that game from start to finish, called up the tip line. Her dad was really lax. He didn't seem to care. It cost her a fortune. You know, you'd be like stuck. What do I do with the fork and the clown? I don't know.
This is before Google as well, right? So.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. You had to call up some, like, basically American 0898 number, and it would cost, like...
Or you could have asked Games Master.
Well, you know, Patrick Moore was quite busy. I'm not really sure he knew what was going on 99% of the time.
The Games Master knew all, Julie.
Mainly because he probably read it from an autocue. But yeah, anyway, so that was the one that really got me into gaming. Currently, I am between games. I've just finished Metal Gear Solid, the latest really short...
Zeros?
Ground Zero, sorry. The very short game. I've just finished playing that. I'm toying with playing Dark Souls 2, but I can be quite a ragey gamer. I don't want to destroy my lounge. It took me 3 days to cable it. I don't want to throw my TV out the window, and I feel like that might happen. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't quite decided. I've still got my pile of shame. I've been playing some Titanfall as well, because that's pretty fun too. So yeah. Let's move on to you before I just keep talking.
That's everything. Potted history, career advice.
I cried
everything.
once at a fairground when I was 12.
Yeah, me and my games and my life have been very kind of closely intertwined throughout. So, yeah, my first experience was being shoved in front of a Pac-Man machine when I was on holiday in France, just so my parents could get drunk and leave me to play Pac-Man. And then they carried on doing that at home by buying me a Spectrum, just letting me do that in perpetuity. So, yeah, I've been gaming for 31 years now. I don't think there could have been any other career path that I really could have taken. Everything I did was geared towards getting into the games industry, and I've now been in the industry for 13 years. So, yeah, and right now I am playing... I've got into Dark Souls finally. It's my 4th attempt, but now I'm really deeply stuck into it. And if anyone is playing it or has played it, I'm currently at An Orlando, and it's hard. And that's it. Much shorter.
Exactly. I'm not sure how to live up to the first story there. So for me, it's quite a journey, I suppose. We talk about gaming. I've kind of been in the gaming industry now for about 15, 16 years or so. Although some days I kind of look back and think, how the hell did I get here? I come from the IT industry, of all things. And just to scare you even more, from banking and insurance, which is scary. I'm not that old, by the way, but I try not to tell you my first game that I ever played. So, you know, my kind of history is like this. I started up in the city working for a bunch of banks and insurance companies, and sort of reached a point in IT where I thought, you know what, I really don't want to do this anymore. And I can remember speaking to the agency at the time, saying to them, I'm in London, get me south. I really want to go to the coast and work somewhere by the sea. Brighton will do. And they said, well, we've got this company in Wimbledon called IDOS. And I went, okay, what's that mean? IDOS, what do? They do games. And, you know, I was a massive film fan, and I thought, well, films, games, we'll give it a go. So I started as a contractor. Now, I for those of you who can remember Gordon Gekko days, but three-piece suits from the city, I turned up in IDOS my first day in a three-piece suit, sitting on a bench not so dissimilar to this, waiting for the IT manager. I was contracting as a consultant, waiting for the IT manager to come and get me. And I was there at 9:45, because that's what you did. And at 11:15, this guy came out in bare feet, shorts and a T-shirt, and said, "Do you want to come through?" And there I felt so out of place. But I've got to tell you, I just didn't look back, to be honest with you. The 7-8 years or so at Eidos, you probably, if you know Square Enix, we've been through a number of iterations as Eidos and SCI and into Square Enix now. But my word, I think there's a question you were going to ask me with regards to getting into gaming. Is it easy? Is it hard? We'll talk about that. But to be honest with you, to find myself in the gaming industry, my word, I was just it was a blessing in disguise. The Eidos days were rock and roll, absolutely rock and roll, great fun. Tomb Raider, my God, I think I turned up on the second Tomb Raider at Christmas time, and I'd never seen anything like it. Sales director was. I think at one point the CEO was giving a piggyback round the office because Tomb Raider had just done some silly amount of money, and coming from my world, it was definitely something new. And then sort of moving through with SCI and now with Square Enix, I've got to say it's great fun. First game, I thought about this. I'll give my age away. I just have to, I suppose. But I'm 10 or 11 years old and the Atari console comes out and I'm playing Pong. And I'm sure there's some of you here that can remember those days, if you squint hard enough. But to be honest with you, there's a bunch of irony here as well. I think the first game that I really played and finished, any of you that are from my part of the world, I'm South London, Carshalton, there's a place called Westcroft Sports Centre, and as a kid, I used to stand at this arcade machine playing Space Invaders. And I clocked it, and I was probably the first out of our group of kids, the first person to clock Space Invaders, and it was a massive deal. It was a big deal. I can remember that moment, to be honest with you.
I didn't actually realise that was a clockable game, to be honest.
I finished the game, and I can remember to this date that to score maximum points on the spacecraft, you had to have, it was 22 shots, and a 23rd shot would give you maximum points on the mystery, and then from then on, I forget what it was, but. I just couldn't leave this flipping thing alone. Games I'm playing, the games that I'm playing now, I have a 5-month-old baby, so the main game is sleeping. But the other game I've got, I don't know, I seem to have reverted back to, I've got a Nexus 7. I'm playing Tetris. I'm traveling. You're sitting on I pick up Tetris and away I go. When I'm at home, I'm trying to finish Tomb Raider. Currently, I'm not just going to say this because I work for Square Enix and Eidos, but it's awesome. I just can't put the flipping thing down. But it's in small iterations, and that's, you probably can see the type of game player I am. I pick a game up for an hour and put it down again, and then run off and do something else.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Louise?
So I'm Louise. I'm Curator of Digital Design at the V&A. I feel a little bit of an interloper. The amount of experience on this panel is slightly making me quiver. But I have been at the museum for donkey's years, for a long time now. And I took up a new position as Curator of Digital Design in January 2013. So we've been there just a little over a year. And the kind of going into that job, it was a signal from the museum which was kind of getting serious about collecting digital design, and that ranges from video games to websites to all sorts of kind of iterations. The first acquisition we made was the 3D printed gun by Cody Wilson, and we attempted to collect the hardware, the gun, and the software, the STL files for 3D printing. To cut a really long story short, we collected a replica of the gun. We, of course, just 3D printed one ourselves instead of trying to import a 3D printed gun from Texas. Just had my second license approved. But we can't collect the STL files from Cody Wilson because they're currently property of the US government. But they are publicly available on the Pirate Bay, for instance. But as a kind of anecdote, it kind of gives you an indication into the types of problems a museum that's been going since 1852 has when trying to think about digital design. We have been kind of commissioning and exhibiting digital for a long time, really. I was involved in the UVA's first commission in the garden. I co-curated a show with Shane Walter of 1.0 called Decode, which was the first kind of big investigation into the museum about digital as a process, as a kind of material and a technique for new production methods. But we weren't really collecting. We collected a few things from Decode, and they went into the computer art collection. So we have the National Emerging Collection of Computer-Generated Art and Design, as well as the digital design collection, which seems a bit more snappier. So things I'm currently working on at the moment, I'm working on a video games exhibition, which, although 2017 probably sounds like an age away, it's actually not that far in the museum terms. You know, we're already possibly a bit behind, but I'm co-curating that with Alex Wiltshire, who I'm sure you all know as the former editor of Edge magazine. And really what we'll be thinking about that is what's the kind of different type of visitor experience in a video game exhibition. The last thing we want to do actually is result to a kind of gameplay within the exhibition space. We want to resist that. We think that's been done really well by many people. The Barbican show, for instance, was fantastic for that. But actually, we think the best thing would be for people not to play games in space, but to start to understand the process of design within video games, which we think hasn't really been kind of tackled. And that could be anything from engines to, you know, product design in video games. We always cite, you know, Batman's mobile phone. That's interface design. So we should talk about that, and we should talk about sound design and kind of characters and all these things. And at the moment, we're working. Our kind of working title is Headshot. So a philosophy of video games. So taking things from video games that have influenced wider culture, wider kind of contemporary culture. We think that would only come from video games. My first game I ever played, I think it was either Booty or Jet Set Willy, either them, or, and I'm really ashamed to say this one, the game that I really got into with my sister was Leisure Suit Larry. Really embarrassed, but it was the game that, it was the influence, I think I've even gone red, the influence of my older brother and the kind of words Ken sent me, the kind of password that you had to use to get in. You know, I'm ashamed to say that that's the game that really got me going. And at the moment, because we're thinking about types of games, I'm kind of dipping in between quite a lot, but probably the one I've spent a bit of time on is Limbo recently. I'm really sorry about Larry.
Cool. Well, now we've got to know each other. Let's dip into the discussion. So we're going to talk about 4 different main topics tonight. We'll discuss them on the panel here, and then we'll do a bit of Q&A as we go, as opposed to waiting to the end, so you guys can get some questions in as well. The first thing I wanted to discuss with you guys is to do with sort of getting a career in the industry. So obviously, 3 out of our 4 panel here work in the industry. It'd be interesting to hear your views on how to best do that, really. So obviously, journalism is one of the easiest ways to get into the industry, I suppose, with things like YouTube, people being able to stream their games, and people getting paid to do that now with advertising. Obviously, Julia and Dan, you've got quite a history in the games journalism industry. What would you say to someone looking to get into that, and how would you best prepare them for the journey?
I think it's probably the question I get asked more than anything else ever, really. It's and the funny thing is, if you talk to most people within the industry, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, like you can't use me as an example because everyone's always got like a really odd way that they got into the industry. And like I was saying before, it was sort of through doing TV presenting, but then kind of came around to it. But I do think it's a very, very different time now, and there's not sort of all these barricades and walls between the people who make games and the people who write about games. It's very, very easy to get in contact with people, and there are so many people who are putting on events like yourselves, where you can kind of go and sort of meet the makers effectively. Probably the best advice is to find someone doing what you want to do, and follow them on Twitter or go to events, go and meet them. And there are so many platforms at the moment where you can practice and get good at it, like, blogging, or if you want to get into sort of video content or commentary, obviously there's YouTube. YouTube is a very strange beast within itself, but wonderfully fantastic. And there's a lot of very talented people and some untalented people as well, but a lot of very talented people who do very well. I mean, it really is hard work, and the ones who do succeed do put in a lot of hours to do it. And there's ways of kind of, bringing up, unfortunately, it does come down to things like Twitter followers a little bit as well. So if you've got an interesting voice, you'll naturally find that people will want to listen to it, and thereby you get kind of more Twitter followers, and you get to talk to people more and just connect. And And once you're sort of, kind of got your foot a little bit in the door, probably the next best advice is working in gaming. There's literally, for me, there isn't really a divide between my social life and my work life. They're basically the same thing. Like some of my closest best friends I've met through games. I hang out with them. I've got one of them living at my house at the moment. There is a complete blur between that. And going to all of these events, the best way you'll ever find out about jobs is, it's quite a small journalistic community, to be fair. Pretty much everyone knows everyone. And if you kind of put the feelers out that you're looking for work, people will tend to come back and say, oh, I've heard about something here, I've heard about something there. You pretty much just have to throw yourself head first into the whole industry and let it consume your life and lose time to game because you're out drinking. But that's the price you pay, I think.
I mean, you say it's like it's one of the easiest ones to get into. I think it's the easiest one to claim that you're a part of.
Yes.
That's the difference. Is like everyone can set up a blog or a website and say, I'm a games journalist now, and it's like, well, not really. It's like, I've never claimed to be a games journalist. I've always been in corporate editorial up until recently, like starting my own business, and I've never been ashamed of the fact that I worked in corporate editorial, because I was always trying to bring an element of credibility to that. But further to Julia's point, like a big part of getting into games writing, especially, it is a very nepotistic field. It can feel quite elitist and feel like a little kind of club in that regard. Which makes it very difficult to get into in that regard. And the kind of democratization of that through the online space, through video, through written editorial, online on blogs, etc., means, yes, it's a lot easier to get your work out there, but it makes it even harder for you to get your work noticed, because now you're not just competing with a small group of publications, you're competing with thousands upon thousands of other writers doing exactly the same thing. So the best advice I can give is also to find your niche now, because gaming is so broad that if you're just going to be trying to run a site that is just running the same old news stories and reviews, it's like, you're not going to beat VG247 or IGN or Eurogamer. You've just got to knock that on its head. You've got to find another angle for it. And that's why in the video space, things like Yogscast and that have been doing things that at the time that they started up were like nothing that those sites were doing. They were very much pioneers in that field. So you've got to continue to occupy that mindset of like, how can I pioneer? How can I find my space in doing it?
It's about like finding a strong voice as well.
Yeah.
It's like if you can't compete with all these big kind of news sites that have like huge staff and whatever, it becomes more and more important what your voice is and having a really strong opinion. At least you get debate going, right or wrong. I mean, you'll get some flack for it online. Obviously, people will disagree with you because no one is more passionate than someone who's into games. It's quite terrifying. But at least you're kind of getting a debate going, and that's the only way you can really compete, I think.
Yeah, I think social media is the next form now. As you're saying, getting the Twitter following it, the Facebook, having that voice and actually having people who are already established in the industry pay attention to what you're saying and what you're doing really helps as well. The name always makes me cringe, but Game Wank. There's a chap on that, Jim, who recently got hired by Video Gamer, and that was on the strength of doing like really unique videos with a very kind of unique voice, and that's how he got that job. So yeah, it is that. On the other hand, now we are kind of seeing a different path for people who are established, and that's because games writing also is not a big money career. Like if you want to get into it, you're going to have to be editing something if you want to make a packet, or as Julia says, have about 5 or 6 freelance gigs on the go, or basically just do corporate editorial like I did.
Damn you and your regular
But
pay.
now we're seeing the rise of Patreon, however it's meant to be pronounced, and people who are established now are getting out of the freelance field and just letting the people that actually consume their work be the people that pay for it directly, rather than and just cutting out the middleman. So it's kind of a subscription model, but for a particular writer than it is for a magazine or a website. It's an interesting way things are going.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, the whole kind of Patreon thing. There's part of me that just thinks like, oh wow, look, free money. But no, I don't think I'm going to do it. It's just like terrifying. Could you imagine like putting something out there and then no one does it? Oh my God, it'd be awful. I'd let you be sick. Oh. But yeah, the other thing is with sort of YouTube as well. I mean, you guys must know a lot, I presume you know a fair bit about how kind of the monetization of YouTube has changed quite a lot. I think before, maybe a couple of years back, it was something $10 to $12 per sort of thousand, and now it's a lot less. It's about $2.50. There's not a huge amount of money in it. But what you are seeing is that YouTube is becoming sort of the window shop, right? So if you can get out there and make really good content on there, people are looking to YouTube to find the next big thing, the next big people who can like talk and you know, and video content is, unfortunately, it's sort of the way things tend to be going. People want to see interesting viewpoints, and you know, games are very visual, so having pictures next to them and video is probably quite useful too. So it is something. I mean, I sort of run my own kind of like YouTube thing, but just I don't make any money out of it by any means, but it's just a really good platform to kind of practice like just things that I want to do in my kind of free time, and it is a good kind of, because people do notice, they're like, oh, you've done like the latest thing that you've done or whatever, and it's a way of people kind of checking your work out. So yeah, unfortunately, it's like with most industries that are really, really, really popular, you are going to work a lot for free initially until you get to sort of a place where you can demand money, bang your fist on the desk. That doesn't work.
And Haitham, with you working in the games companies that create the games, you must have a completely different take on this. I mean, obviously there was news today about the EU Commission approving the games tax relief.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to affect things in terms of people getting into the actual game development industry?
That's a good question. I don't really know. I haven't read the detail yet, but I mean, a few things that came to mind. I think it's interesting, you know, listening to you guys talk, because I'm kind of on the other side of the fence. I've sort of come from the engineering background to the kind of platform part of gaming. If that makes any sense. You know, my roles, you know, throughout my gaming career have been traditional IT. So, you know, and not so many moons back, it was just really console gaming, I suppose, PC gaming. That's where we were. And from a sort of group IT perspective, it was supporting the studios. Now that's a whole night of discussions over there. So we'll park that piece. But you know, your original question about getting into gaming. Now what I'm seeing is, you know, traditionally, if you wanted to get into games, especially in our world, you'd start as a QA staff. You know, you'd come and test games, and you know, my God, I've got some great friends that are now executive producers on titles, some really well-known titles who started in QA, you know, and good on them, because my word, that is you know, the amount of people who come up and said, oh, I really want to, you know, test games. I'm like, yeah, after about 20,000 hours of the same game, you really want to just cry, you know, because you're just bleeding from the eyes and you want to go home. But
well, people say they always like, I want to go in QA so I can play games all day. So, no, you play broken games all day.
It's a tough one, and then you kind of move on now where the industry's changed, because we've moved into free to play, you know, gaming, which, you know, for my world now, I've sort of parked sort of IT over that side, and now looking at sort of online infrastructure and architecture for games, which is a different discussion. So the types of people that are coming to me and asking, you know, how do I get into gaming, are they're engineers, you know, they're architects. I've just come back from GDC. I mean, it's Geeksville. You know, I actually feel at home. It's brilliant. You know, I'm been walking around for years now thinking, these are, you know, really smart people that understand gaming as well as the architecture. So the interesting thing, and the question you just raised about the EU, we have a studio in Montreal, and one of the reasons we set the studio up 5-6 years or so now is because we got government funding, and it was through Invest Quebec. I haven't compared the percentages. I don't know what the EU is planning to offer. I think it feels like it's been going over 2 or 3 years now. I can remember them talking about it, and at the time. So how it works in Quebec is that you only get a percentage tax rebate based on the production of the game. So you have to be making the game. You know, you can't. In my world of infrastructure, they just won't interest you. Although they've just relaxed that. Literally, I mean, right now I'm talking to Invest Quebec to say, hey, what about architectural engineers? And they're saying, yeah, we'll probably you know, let you guys come in and get a 37% rebate, which is, you know, a big deal. So here, I don't know. I imagine it's going to be very similar kind of, you know, they're going to no doubt take a model and say it's 25, 30%, or whatever it may be, but it has to be on, you know, production of the game. At the end of the day, it's the amount of funding that goes behind this. I mean, I don't know. Is it on a per game basis? You know, I can just hear it now. Here's $2 million. Get going. I can tell you now, $2 million is going to last you. It's about a month or a quarter of a month. You know, it's literally going to be that. So I don't want to knock it, but you know, absolutely want the UK and London to become the centre
But I mean, even if it's just in the sense of, I mean, obviously, yeah, without going into like the specifics of it, but even if it's more just for like the outside perspective, by kind of saying like this is a worthwhile thing to, you know, be of benefit to this country, at least then maybe it sort of can change an outside perspective, and maybe that in itself will,
so.
you know, change things later on.
No, I hope so. I mean, I'm believe you me, I'm supporting it. You know, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. I just hope we do it well, because we sometimes have a way of not doing it well.
Doing it, but not really doing
exactly. We're kind of going to do it, but not really going to do it.
It's actually a positive move, though, because the reason the EU kind of clamped down on it before was basically because they didn't acknowledge it as a legitimate art form to sit along the others, and therefore they deserve the break. So in that regard, it also represents a great cultural breakthrough for gaming, because it means that they accept it now.
Yeah, I believe they spent like the last 3 years trying to push it through, trying to say it is equal to film and music. You know,
and now the projections are something like it's going to be at the cost of like 90 million to the state, but with the effects of generating something like 350 million total in combined revenue and kind of securing over 4,000 jobs. So, you know,
it can only be a good thing, right?
I mean, it's got to be applauded.
And on that note, really, I mean, do you think we're in a bit of a golden age of gaming, in the way that, you know, anyone in their bedroom can now, you know, make a game, put it on Steam Greenlight, you know, Xbox Live Indie, and, you know, Kickstarter, for example, like Oculus Rift was a Kickstarter project. Do you think that kind of removal of the barrier of the publisher, it's had a positive and a negative effect, would you say? Like, kind of in the way that, you know, it's allowed and empowered people to get their thing out there, but at the same time, it's created a bit of a lot of noise, shall we say, like, you know.
But I think it is incredibly positive. I think that any way that sort of makes it a bit more democratic, where anyone can sort of do it. And, you know, I remember like my brothers used to sit at home making awful games, just terrible games. But, you know, it's something that they got really into, they're really passionate about, they talked about with their friends, and anything that can kind of excite a generation, the younger generation, to actually get involved in it. And if the best way of, you know, learning is just through doing and being able to put stuff out there and getting feedback and improving what they're doing, you know, and maybe it'll have such a big effect that, you know, in sort of like 5 years' time, we're going to have an even better industry in this country. Admittedly, yes, it does make it slightly flooded. There is an awful lot of terrible stuff like some of my brother's games out there, but, you know, I think that's not really that much of a negative to really not warrant doing it, I think.
Did you have a Kano workshop before this?
Yeah, so we had earlier today in the morning, we had a bunch of kids in from a was it a primary school, Joe? Yeah, 10 or 11-year-olds, was it? Year 6. They came along and sat in the kitchen out there. With a bunch of Kano kits, Kano. They're like a little Raspberry Pi type thing. Kids can sort of put the pieces of a computer together themselves. So a little circuit board, a little audio, connecting the HDMI for the video, and, you know, all the little bits and pieces. And then they actually get to do the kind of basics of a bit of coding and make their own games on there. So we had them in there practicing and hopefully creating the little gamers of the future.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, like, my dad's an electronics engineer, but he's one of these people who just does not explain things in a sensible fashion. Like, I'll be like, "What's this, Dad?" And instead of just explaining what that is in a really sensible way, he'll tell me the entire history of the thing, starting from the very, very beginning. And by that point, you've just like switched off. So anything that's not like my dad's way of teaching, I think, is of benefit. So you can actually learn the basics of it without just getting a whole load of other stuff as well.
I mean, I think it's comparable to other industries that have, you know, had a kind of democratization of publishing or of access to audience and feedback. And that's only been, of course, it has an impact on something like book publishing, but it's also thrilling and exhilarating to experience the written word in a totally different way. And I think, you know, none of us really want to kind of turn the clock back. We will still have books, we will still have games published in another way, but it just gives you access to immediate feedback and audiences, and that, and kind of practicing your design skills as well. I think it's an amazing opportunity.
I think the last question I wanted to ask on this topic was about esports, and I think Haitham, working for a Japanese company, you might have an interesting insight into this. So there's actually a film playing on the screen over there called Free to Play. It's a new Valve movie. It's about a game called Dota 2, and basically there's people on teams here who have managers, they have sponsorships, they have everything, and they compete internationally against each other on a computer game. And this particular movie follows the path of a bunch of teams, with the winner taking away, I believe, $1.4 million. So it's quite a big deal now. But we don't really see too much of that over here, unless I'm mistaken.
I mean, they're trying to build quite a lot in the UK through sort of different things like esports. So this weekend will be in Los Angeles is the World Call of Duty Championships, which has a prize pot of $1 million. So I think top team gets 400,000. So it's pretty sizable. Obviously, it's paid for by Activision because they got loads of money. They're just like, take it, don't even miss it. So they had the kind of EU heats over here as well. There are, a couple of companies in this country who are trying to sort of build up esports. There is still the kind of thing, it's nerds, sitting at home and competing or whatever. But, I think it is kind of pushing forward. I mean, certainly like in America, people who kind of do competitive Call of Duty are kind of like jocks a bit. It's more like that. Whereas over here, I think it's still seen as kind of a bit geeky. What you doing? But I think, that will change in time. I think when the general sort of view of gaming changes, really, when people finally accept that they are just all gamers. I mean, they are. You play on your phone. I'm sorry. I hate to tell you, you're a gamer. Just accept it. Come out of the closet, all right, and just accept it. And then we can move on and get even better stuff, I reckon. But yeah.
I on that note, though, I don't think we'll see esports break into the same kind of public consciousness as standard sports, because ultimately the thrill of watching a sport is seeing people like peak physical fitness or performing incredible acts that kind of speak for themselves. So even if you're watching darts, which probably requires as much physical effort as esports, maybe less, but at least you go, oh, okay, he's throwing the tiny dart into the dartboard and he's in a little space and that's good, and people can identify that. But try televising Dota 2 and conveying why what so-and-so did was an absolutely incredible move. It's absolutely nightmarish. It's never really gonna make that transition. You might find it occupying the same slot as like late night poker, where people are saying things like, there's the flop, and everyone's like, what the hell do you mean? But then the only kind of game I've seen played at tournament level that I think you have to have zero knowledge of the game to enjoy are fighting games, because that's already got an analog. People have watched boxing matches, but people have watched wrestling. They know about the ebb and flow of combat, and again, you see feats performed in that are readily translatable and go, okay, what he just did was incredible. Everyone's seen the Daigo parry video. Those events are far and few between, but anyone who watches that goes, holy shit, how did he block 18 hits of a super and counter that into a combo or whatever? They won't use that terminology. Someone like me would use that terminology. But that's it. It has to be something to break through. It has to involve a visually exciting aspect that doesn't require additional explanation, I believe.
I mean, I suppose it's only really Call of Duty would be near that, really, just because it's, people getting shot. That's understandable. You're alive and then you die. That's not a good thing, sort of thing. But, I mean, it's quite interesting talking about, seeing people in their peak physical fitness, and I do agree with you on that. But one thing, like hanging around a lot of like esports kids, and a lot of them are kids, they're very, very young. I mean, I'm personally like really impressed the amount of time and dedication they put into it. I know they just think they just rock up, they'll stream for like 8 hours a day.
Yeah, they wake up and play and then sleep.
It's just bonkers. I mean, it's just completely crazy. To see that, and then it's just so utterly gutting when you see someone who's basically, it's the same thing when you watch like athletics or something, and you've seen someone like get up, they've got up so early and they've trained so hard, and then it's just been horrendously crushed.
There's definitely some heart-wrenching parts in that documentary.
Yeah,
so do you think there'll be kind
awful,
of esports physiotherapy?
For
thumbs.
Give me your
RSI.
thumbs.
So it's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, I don't know too much about it, but the kind of burnout rate of, young players, it is. Maybe we need like a help group. Amazing. But that physical kind of dedication and kind of sacrifice to this is incredible.
When they talk about age and they speak about becoming 30, it's like they're basically dead. And like there's no point. You're just dead. You're useless. Your reflexes are awful. Like you might as well just give up. Why bother getting out of bed? It's frightening.
Yeah, there's definitely analogues to physical sport. But
there's a big divorce rate as well if you look around World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, which is quite scary, really. When
a few people have died, I hear as well.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, to be honest with you.
Lack of something, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm probably not the demographic because I can't get my head around it, to be honest with you. But I understand playing games for a time. But I travelled to Japan and met people there that are on their third day of gaming, and it's pretty Strange?
Smell of Red Bull
Well,
permeating the air.
That's sort of the question. I mean, is it strange over there though? I mean, it's a different.
No, it's It's quite
Yeah.
acceptable in the gaming. I don't know if that's the right thing to say. It seems acceptable now. I mean, if you go back to my other life, I would have thought that's a bit crazy. But I think I get it. I absolutely get it. I mean, we've all been hooked on games, throughout our time. I mean, Doom lost my life, and SimCity lost my life. I mean, you do. I mean, Championship Manager, lose your life. I mean, that's how it is. But I don't know, the competitiveness, being competitive and playing a game for 3 days, there's something else there you have to sort of look at, I think. And you're going to tell me, no, don't be so stupid. That's normal.
I mean, a lot of these kids do earn huge sums of money. They're getting more and more kind of astute about it. So there's a team in America called Optic who don't tend to win. They still will come like top 3, but they're supposed to win. But they have like a team house, and they will basically stream every day from there. So they make huge YouTube revenues as well from doing it. It's becoming quite a business within itself. It's quite fascinating to sort of see.
That's where
it
Twitch
unfold.
has helped out a lot as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite sort of fascinating to see it. Although I don't know if I could play Call of Duty today. No.
Well, I think that's a good point to take a few questions from the audience, if there are any. There don't appear to be any questions, so we might just
That means
crack on.
we answered all of the things.
on any of the topics.
I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Okay, we'll crack on.
Wow, I'm going to give this back.
We've sort of segued into the next topic already, which was are games more socially acceptable nowadays? And I think we've sort of touched on that already. But I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask was how games are going to kind of continue to cement themselves into our daily lives. I mean, we've all got a relative who probably shunned the word gamer and said, "Oh, you're a dirty recluse." But then, sat and played Farmville. So, everyone's a gamer nowadays, but, whether it's on a mobile or on a Facebook game. Do you think like gamer is still a dirty word? Like, is it still considered something that's bad?
I'm kind of opposed to gamer as well, because to me now, gamer represents a kind of subset of player. Like TV has viewers, radio has listeners, gaming has gamers. Like gaming has players, people who play. It's the verb to play, not to game. And I think gamers is in itself kind of a dirty word, because to me it represents the hostile subset of people that you're confronted with when people go online and go, Christ, everyone's really toxic here. And the people that you get on YouTube comment boards, they're gamers. The people that populate forum boards and things like that.
The ones that have all effed your mum, basically.
Yeah. My mum's been about it by all accounts, but but yeah, I mean that to me is it. Is like I am a player of games, and gamers is obviously a very convenient shorthand now. But I think that word now has such a stigma attached to it that I think even people who are now playing Candy Crush and Farmville and whatever they're playing on their phone still wouldn't describe them as such, because they associate it with their teenage son who they've seen playing Call of Duty and just like screaming foul language at people, and it's like, oh, that's a gamer.
Yeah. Do we need a rebranding, do you think, then? Is that what we need?
We need a PR image makeover. There's
enough PRs. They should be able to rustle something up.
But I think also part of the reason for that is, coming from a museum, video games doesn't really have a cemented place in design history. So it's kind of been skirted around the issue a little bit in museums and in kind of temporary exhibitions. But what and it's not just a kind of PR spiel, but I think what we're really hoping to do is cement that within a wider context of design history. And I think when people would come to somewhere like the V&A, they may go to the medieval and Renaissance galleries and expect that, and they may not expect to see a selection of contemporary video games. And the way that we're thinking about the exhibition at the moment is, a kind of a 16-year-old player with his parents, and him or her acting as the kind of explainer for these terms and these kind of philosophies that are only present in video games. And hopefully by doing that, we'll help to relate that back to kind of sculpture or to, we have paintings, we have photography, we don't collect film, but we have a kind of massive collection of applied art and design, and we think that really sits in. So I think gradually, when that happens and it's in a kind of broader cultural sphere, I think it will be, I guess people, like you say, will fess up a bit more. that it's okay?
I think it's just it's been that sort of thing of, you know, I think adults tend to always think gaming's like for kids because originally that's what it was supposed to be about. It wasn't an adult form of entertainment, and now, you know, those kids have grown up and they still want to play games. I think, you know, the whole violence in video games debate has kind of held it back as well, and it is still that thing of like, oh, it's a nerdy one, you go outside and get some sunshine, and like, of course, you're not supposed to stay at home your whole life and play video games. It's meant to, you know, enrich your life and add something to it, not, you know, detract from it. And it's sort of almost, it's a bit annoying, really, that it's been held back by all these different things, because just the applications for what gaming can do, even just one thing, I suppose, for me, I suppose, is education. These wonderful ways of teaching and engaging students with fascinating subjects in a way that books just cannot possibly even compare with. And it's all been held back by all these kind of little hurdles. And it frustrates me that they can't just, I mean, in this day and age that we're still, you know, kind of having these debates about it. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, around education especially, and you were talking about 3D printing. At GDC, I was blown away. I mean, I'm like you guys, I love 3D printing. I just sort of stand there as a geek looking at 3D printers going, this is really awesome. But Lego, for example, you know, you can now 3D print Lego. Okay, you might kind of go, I'm 3D printing a piece of Lego, why don't I go and buy it? But the geek in me is kind of, I'm printing a piece of Lego. It's fantastic. So, you know, I think when you look at, and I'm sure there's a number of other companies out there, whether it's the Hasbros of the world or whoever, that are, you know, looking to 3D print stuff, then the sort of education tie with technology and parents being able to look in and go, actually, this is not a Call of Duty. I'm not, you know, haven't got a however aged son or daughter throwing grenades at somebody. There's something quite educational here around tech. 3D printing for me is just awesome. I was reading that, this made me laugh, Hershey bars, the guys that make chocolate, 3D printing chocolate.
I would just
love
take
the idea
original
of.
source material and drink it.
So-
Why would you wait?
I want chocolate Lego.
Chocolate Lego.
But I think what you're saying is right about education. I think once coding is on the curriculum for a few more years, and it's, you know, and it's kind of much more in kind of parents' consciousness, it will just become, you know, like PE on a Wednesday. It will be kind of coding. And so we at the museum have quite a lot of educational events about digital design, and we very sadly very recently said goodbye to our first video games designer in residence, Sophia George, who's here in the audience. And the kind of, that was both an opportunity for a young game designer to come with us and to research a kind of game for 6 months and then go to Abate and make the game, but also then to have open workshops. So, you know, young boys and girls can come and say and speak to Sophia and see a kind of process of design that they've never imagined would be able to, one, have access to, and two, be in a kind of museum.
I mean, I always kind of thought, like, I talk to I've got lots of teacher kind of friends and stuff like that, and admittedly, these kids should probably not be playing these games, but they'd have, like, kids come in the class talking about, like, Leonardo da Vinci because they played, like, Assassin's Creed and stuff like that. And I always thought it'd be kind of cool, like, if they just made, like, a version of the game that was, like, not violent, but just so you could go around the world and experience it. Just think of the applications for teaching history and actually really absorbing and knowing and feeling what it's actually like to be in these worlds. They could just take out some of the, you know, NPCs and the swords, and away you go. You could just, like, experience the Renaissance.
This one's a big, you talk about Lego, you know, this is a big gateway. This is one of the things that's really made, you know, gaming kind of acceptable within parental circles now, and what they're exposing little Jimmy to. But really because it has that creative element to it. And I think Minecraft is one of the perfect kind of gateway games for people then to get into coding, because they've already been exposed to the kind of building blocks quite literally in this regard for a game, and then it's like that next step. I believe one of the videos I saw about Kano was they were using then Kano to basically create Minecraft mods. So, and they were like, this is even more satisfying than building stuff in Minecraft. It's like, I'm building Minecraft now, and it's just that's that next logical step, I think.
And it's also, it's safe, isn't it, as well? Like, parents are like, they can go on there. It's not like, you know, putting on a headset on Xbox Live, which no. You know, you can go there and it is like other kids, and it's not, I guess it's that sort of thing of like, if you could maybe show parents that, you know, yes, you are playing this version of Assassin's Creed, but like there isn't any violence in it, and they knew it was kind of a safe environment for their kids to be in.
Pedestrian's Creed, would that be?
Yes, just, you know, climbing up and down, taking in views, maybe doing some watercolours and, you know, drinking a nice little grape juice as the sun sets. I don't know what kids do. Is that what they do?
That's fantastic. Let's move on to another topic. I'd like to talk about payment models, innovation, and whether it's taken a sour turn or not. So we talked about Steam Greenlight earlier on, briefly. There's also early access, obviously, free-to-play games, DLC wallet pillaging, as I like to call it, and in-app purchasing. Do you think we're heading in a direction that will benefit or hinder the developers and the consumers?
I think it's one of those things where because it's all kind of in flux at the moment, everyone's kind of cash grabbing as much as they can, and I think it will naturally just settle down after a period. I mean, what was I was talking about actually, was it The Simpsons Tapped Out the other day? Because I think there's one of the things you can buy in the game which is 150,000 donuts, which is $79.99, I want to say. And I feel like, I mean, they've obviously done it and you're like, you are fully aware of what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? There's no mistake with that. You don't accidentally charge people £80 to speed up their building of a Simpsons town. You know, it's just crazy. And I think, wasn't there stuff in the paper where they've started refunding lots of parents now? Because it was sheer like fraudulence, do you know what I mean? But obviously I think with stuff like that, they're kind of clamping down on it. Even iTunes now has to kind of stipulate what it is, in-app purchases, stuff like that. So I think it will naturally, hopefully, come to a nice sort of level. And with stuff like DLC and extra added value, I suppose if they can't really block the second-hand market, which they shouldn't really be allowed to, but then obviously if you offer like a benefit for if you buy this first-hand, you get some extra stuff, that's kind of fair enough. DLC, it depends on the game. Some of it makes it better. Some of it you're like, this was the half of the game that I should have got originally.
Some of it feels like it was removed from the game and then added in as an extra charge.
Suspiciously when it doesn't download anything and just unlocks what was already on the disc. And then you're like, screw you.
Borderlands 2 is a spectacular example of the way to do DLC right. You know, every new piece of content they added was clearly made after the game, is a fully formed, you know, addition to the full game and really enhances it. That's the best way to go about DLC. But return to the whole point about in-app purchases, free-to-play models. The reason they exist is basically because the existing model isn't sustainable for a large chunk of the industry anymore. Putting that amount of money into game development and then hoping that enough people shell out 40, 50 pounds. You know, Tomb Raider, we saw only really broke goals by selling, 5 million copies, 6 million copies, I think. You know, that's not a sustainable model for most publishers now. The report that came out today about the amount we spend as a nation on free-to-play games, it actually turned out that on average, I think 18 to 24-year-olds were spending £35. That's less than the cost of a box product. Yeah. And that's, you know, people see it as a rip-off, but only because there's a certain small group. It's either kids who've managed to figure out dad's password and are just, you know, they're just spending on his credit card going, yeah, and then going, I'm really sorry, Dad, let's just take it to the mirror and then we'll get a refund. Or it's just, you know, people just getting it as and when they need it and putting 69p here and 69p there. And I really don't see a problem with that model.
Do you think it's making developers lazy, though, in the way that they... and episodic content as well, I should mention. You know, with things like early access, where I'll explain the term, sorry. Early access on Steam, which is a PC platform, developers can put up an unfinished game and allow people to purchase it in advance so they can sort of play the work in progress. But in some cases, I don't know, I kind of feel like it might take the pressure off the developers in a way, and you know, maybe they won't spend as much time on it because they've already got the money.
No, I don't know. I think with early access, people are that they can see that the game's in progress, and they're going to be incredibly vocal when they play an unfinished alpha. They're going to be like, well, what's going on here? You know, that's why they release betas, so people can feed back on it.
It's part of the gameplay. It's part of the gameplay. It absolutely is. I mean, free to play. I mean, I've been around free to play games now for the last three years, and you know, working extensively on, you know, a number of titles with those developers. And I think it's really tricky. I mean, you mentioned a minute ago that the industry is upside down. You know, it's not really sure which direction it should be taking. I think you've got to almost compartmentalize gamers and the games they play. And I think and I'm not speaking for a publisher, even though I'm working for a publisher, but I'm looking and watching, because we're sort of behind closed doors, and we're being bombarded by players who, exactly as you just put it there, DLC, free to play, console gaming, but it depends on the individual. I mean, if I went around the room now, there'll be a bunch of people that like playing console games. I'm a console gamer. There'll be guys that like PC games, girls as well, or casual-based games. The list goes on. My experience on free-to-play right now is that it's tough for developers. Yes, they've got the flexibility and that they can alleviate the publisher, kind of, but really they can't. I mean, Minecraft is definitely an exception. Yes, you can develop a game from your bedroom on a laptop, and you can use Amazon and you can use Azure and you can do all of these things, but there's some pretty hefty components that you need to make a successful game. What free-to-play gaming does is, from a very, very early stage, it allows you to test out your game. I mean, you could never do that in console gaming. I mean, Call of Duty's, you need to put 100 million by the side of your desk and start throwing it out the window to see, and by the way, wait 24 months to see whether you get your money back before you make a profit. And with free-to-play gaming, you can host a game on Amazon and test it out. And to your point, it's absolutely spot on. From design and concept to, for us now, we tend to be looking around about closed beta. Closed beta, you've got players. You can have 1,000 players crawling over your game, bitching about it. And do you know what? That's awesome. Because the whole point of making a great game is having the community feedback to you. So before you slide in, and it doesn't have to be money. Money doesn't have to be partied with here. You can play a game and say it's really crap or it's really good. And then you move into that sort of open alpha, open beta phase, which is kind of live, because you're inviting, you've gone from 1,000 players to 10,000 players before you go live. What you can do also, you can say this game will never make it and wrap up the game. Now, okay, you may have a bunch of customers that are unhappy, but you may have reached a point where you've not spent a penny. So, for me, that business model makes lots of sense. And definitely for people that want to get into gaming and be part of game design and game architecture and all those things, it gives them the opportunity to do that. I'd say from the bedroom, but you know what I mean by that.
I don't think there's any other design industry that can do these kind of beta tests. I mean, can you imagine that with chair? There's just like you go to IKEA, you take it away, and then it just wouldn't work.
This is a cardboard version.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. But those cardboard versions. I mean, it seems like the kind of perfect solution, because you get to solve all your problems before. I'm sure it's not the case, but I imagine you solve a hell of a lot of problems before you go to market, and then you've got something that's no one likes.
Yeah, I mean, free to play, especially now. I'd say it's young, isn't it? It's been years. We haven't been through tens and tens of years, so to speak. But I think just on the games we've seen inside, Square Enix, I honestly say we've learned a lot from our Japanese friends in Tokyo, because they're running some really successful free to play games that make a hell of a lot of cash. It's a tricky one. This is a really tricky discussion and a really tricky debate, I would say. And in a year's time, it'd be, that question again. I'm sure it's going to be a slightly different answer.
I think I was just a bit bitter about having to wait for the next episode of Wolf Among Us, because you pay up front for that and you wait months and months and months.
You bought horse armor, didn't you?
But it's so worth the money. It's Telltale.
Well, so on the flip side of that. You mentioned how, working on a game like Call of Duty, you need to have a couple of million up front. A lot of sort of AAA developers are now sort of sticking to the same formula. So they're throwing out the same game over and over again because they know it works. And to spend that much money on something that hasn't been tried and tested would be a bit too much of a gamble. So do you think we're going to see a lot more AAA developers going indie and, working on smaller projects like we've seen happen in the past with, say, Tim Schafer, is it?
Yeah, Double Fine, yeah. No, I think some are not necessarily going the indie route, but like Ubisoft are a good example. They've got a really strong kind of digital distribution division that used to be like Xbox Live Arcade, PSN. We're seeing things like Child of Light now coming out from them this year. Really great, and focusing on smaller projects, but still kind of rolling out the big franchises alongside that. As I see it now, big budget game development is now really echoing the Hollywood model, which is that you get a year of established blockbusters and established franchises. Then you get a few ones where they're trying out a new franchise and basically doing the see what sticks approach. I mean, just had a list of new stuff here. So we've got this year, we've got like Watch Dogs, The Order, 1886, Alien Isolation, even though it's based on a license, is a brand new kind of property. The Crew, The Division, Destiny, Titanfall, The Evil Within, Sunset Overdrive. They're not necessarily risky games in terms of the genres they tackle, but they are trying to tackle those genres in a kind of a different creative way. Alongside that, then you do also have them bringing out the smaller products. But I wouldn't say that the AAA business is entirely risk averse at this moment. It's more that they have to be as low risk as possible for the same reasons that Haitham's expressed earlier, which is it's a very expensive process, and if you go through all of that and you pin all your hopes in this massive kind of tentpole title that's got absolutely no audience attachment whatsoever or bears no relation to any existing franchise or license, you're in a lot of trouble. And that's why Nintendo rely on Mario so much when they're developing new concepts. That's why you get Paper Mario instead of some other paper-based character. You've already got something to attached to. Like, oh, I know Mario.
It's as you mentioned in your latest podcast about the nostalgia factor, right?
Yeah.
So you're sort of playing on that and trying to get people in because they know the characters already.
Yeah, exactly. Kirby's Epic Yarn was not originally a Kirby game. They developed this kind of string model graphic style, but then they attached Kirby to that afterwards because it was like, well, this graphic style alone might not be a big enough draw, so let's put a character there that people are already au fait with, and then hopefully that will work. And more often than not, with Nintendo's own properties, it's actually usually quite a winning combination.
But you've also got brand, it's brand recognition as well. I mean, Tomb Raider is a massive brand. I mean, look at Batman, for example. I mean, we did Arkham Asylum and, the Batman franchise, Lego franchise. I mean, these are franchises that I hope don't go away. So, for me, you're always going to have the sort of AAA-based titles. I mean, I like Call of Duty and Battlefield. It's my kind of game. And I'm probably also of that demographic where I don't mind paying for the game. So it's a tricky one. I mean, get back to the free-to-play world. That's completely different. Completely different.
I think sort of like feeling the big sort of shift really was Journey. Obviously, it won. I think it was 8 BAFTAs, and there'd sort of been kind of discussions, I think, in the sort of journo world about indie games and stuff like that beforehand. But I think that was sort of the moment, I think, when it really felt like all the sort of larger companies were like, hang on, there's like this game and like it could do really well.
I didn't play that one. Is that the sort of deserty one on PlayStation?
Yeah, where you just kind of, you don't know why you're there, and and I think like you're saying, I don't think you're ever going to lose like these AAA titles, but bringing all this kind of new wave of like kind of bedroom programmers and gamers and all these kind of like indie titles is that because they don't have these overheads, they're looking at gaming in a completely different way. And whereas like when you have a AAA title, you kind of stick to the rough formula of like how it's going to go because you don't want to do something completely different because then like you're saying, you don't want to lose like an absolute shed.
But look at the content. I mean, again, if you as I say, you look at the individual who wants to play the game. I mean, the content on a console is completely different to. I mean, look at Walking Dead.
Yeah.
I mean, what a great game. And actually, the business model around it, I mean, to me, makes sense. I mean, you talk about. I'm trying to get my head around how you make money on episodical downloads, but it kind of makes sense to me. It's no different to how we consume Dexter or The Walking Dead or Boardwalk Empire, or you put 6 out there and then the other 6 come along later on down the line. I mean, I can consume content that way. I would absolutely be happy with. I'd pay $1.99 for 6 episodes. If I don't like it, I won't pay any more. But if I like the 6, I'll pay for 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 and keep going. Now that's interesting for the developer now, because what tends to happen here is that your community is worth everything. Because you've got feedback on, 6 games at $1.99. Your 7th game means you're constantly having to push and push and push. So it's for me, console gaming sort of sits there, sort of indie gaming sits here.
Yeah.
It's very compartmentalized.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like really exciting with people just experimenting in so many different ways. And when there is sort of a success, it means that then it's less of a risk if, say, like a studio then wants to adopt something similar from that. They're like, well, look at that one did all right. So actually, they're not going into completely unfamiliar territory. But you have everything from really like the gameplay to like the business model to everything's kind of being tried out and tested. And it's quite an exciting time to be involved in gaming. It's very different.
Yeah, it's funny that Journey's held up to this kind of star of indie development. But I mean, that game company, fine, made it, but it had a lot of investment from Sony.
Yeah.
Flow, Flower, and Journey were all backed by Sony Santa Monica, and Journey almost bankrupted that game company when they made it. So it was only the plaudits and the kind of posthumous purchases that resulted of all the plaudits that actually kind of pulled them out of the funk they're about to end up in.
Cool. So to change tack slightly, with things like digital purchasing now, which is becoming more possible due to bigger storage, faster internet connections, allowing us to download games via the internet. I mean, I pulled down maybe 10 or 15 games from my Steam library the other day, and it took a couple of hours to download what was probably 200 gigs. So it's definitely getting there now. Maybe on consoles, we're not quite there yet.
No, not so much. Like patches day one, Xbox One, like Forza, huge. You've only got like 500 gigabytes. It's like that thing. Yeah, it's going to just be full within about 2 minutes. I don't think we're getting the right way, but I don't think we're quite there yet. And bearing in mind that my internet is fairly temperamental at the best of times, I don't think everyone has like that.
How far off do you think we are from sort of seeing the end of physical discs and hello to online wallets of games, if you like?
Very. No, you walk into a music shop, people are still buying vinyl, people are still buying CDs. They're not big industries, but there's still a market for them. Look at the switch over to digital TV, how long that actually took to communicate and ensure that the majority of the population were on TVs. There's always going to be a big chunk of people who aren't at the front of all these technical innovations. So I don't think for most, a great chunk of kind of casual consumers of gaming, that the retail space is going to be completely abandoned in favour of a completely like digital marketplace. You got to think of like moms who still pop along to Tesco and just pick some off the shelf out of curiosity or something like that. I think
you're not allowed to mention curiosity here.
Out of curiosity, certainly not to buy curiosity. I think we underestimate how much is still generated from physical media. The fact, for example, that Ground Zeroes was available as a retail game shouldn't have been available as a retail game, because I think that was part of the reason it ramped up the cost. But it shows that Konami, for example, still see a lot of value in distributing it through that stream as well. I think progress will be slower than most of us would like. But by the same token, as you say, you're already doing that on Steam. Yeah. Those methods already exist. We've got things like PS Now on the horizon as well. So the means are there for people that want it. I just don't think it's necessarily in everyone's interest to abandon physical media as quickly as some would have it.
What about trading?
Yeah, trading. I mean,
I think MCV either this month or last month was saying that Walmart now is rolling out their trade-in model. So they're just about to do it to 3,100 stores through North America.
I think didn't Xbox just go back on their word again about the whole family sharing thing? And I don't know.
So it's weird. I just got Office 365, for example. My wife just bought Office 365, got an annual license, cloud-based Office, brilliant. But then you get a 5-device model, same as you did with iTunes, stuff like that. That's the way forward on the digital side, I think, at least, is that at least you can share it between devices and between family members and let everyone in the household play it. That's fine. But the trade-in side of things, the reason that shouldn't be abandoned, this is going back to my working class roots, is that I was selling my previous console to buy the next console. I was selling my old games to buy the new games. All this talk of digital and not allowing trade-in, that is pure elitism on the hardware and manufacturers and publishers side, because they don't take into account there's a big audience of people who live on the breadline, who don't have a lot of money. Doesn't mean they should be denied the opportunity to play video games. And being able to buy second-hand games is sometimes people's only means of getting hold of those games. So they need to consider it from a social perspective as well as an economic one.
It's really short-sighted as well, because like you're more likely to try out a different game if you're going to like CEX and it's £5, £10. You're more likely to maybe like try a new franchise that you wouldn't have tried before, play it. So it's really short-sighted to say that you're losing out that money. And you're right, gaming is unbelievably expensive to basically deny someone's right to switch.
Console gaming is unbelievably expensive.
Yes, okay. It's really expensive. I mean, going back to talking a bit about
Because PCs are cheap, aren't they?
well, yeah, it's sort of the Xbox One launch. We're talking about digital distribution, and I don't think I was not in the way you're thinking. I wasn't particularly offended by their strategy in what they originally said. The strategy afterwards was a little bit offensive, but it was sort of that thing of, I guess, like trying to force people to adopt your way of doing things. When I don't know if you guys remember, do you remember when they first started to bring out Oyster cards? And everyone was like, no, I'm not, they're going to track me. You're not knowing that I'm going to go to Old Street and then back to Angel. How dare you? And then they sort of went on and they said, well, you don't have to use Oyster, but it's going to be, I think it was 30% cheaper or something originally?
I'm pretty sure they tripled the cost of without Oyster to
anyway,
encourage you along.
It sounded good, right? And then all of a sudden everyone was like, actually, I'm not that bothered if I'm tracked because I've just saved a load of money, right? So you're suddenly your principles go out the window. So I reckon if Xbox
yours is registered.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Shh, like a ninja, like a tube ninja. But if maybe Xbox One had sort of adopted more of that kind of strategy of saying, well, you can buy the box copies, but they're going to be this price. But then actually, maybe if we made them super duper cheap, and it's an opt-in thing.
I still don't understand why it's so expensive to buy an Xbox game through Xbox.
I can provide insight.
Ooh, yes, let's hear. Let's hear.
The main reason is because of retailers.
Interesting. Right, let's change again. Let's talk hardware. Right. So, first of all, what are your opinions on the new generation of consoles? I know that you've got quite a strong opinion on one of them, Dan. But let's go around the room and see.
No, you go ahead.
What do we all think?
I don't have what strong opinion would that be? I'm curious.
Have a rant. Go on.
No. I'm not. No. I'm not a fan of Xbox One. I'm not, but not for the obvious reasons. I'm just not.
It's too big.
Yeah, it's a massively intrusive piece of hardware at the moment that needs to be downsized. The Connect 2 is a ridiculously, preposterously sized addition. The cables, everything's just chunky and ugly, and even down to the actual design of the UI, it's just an ugly machine right now. But I think your question was originally do you feel that we're kind of being undersold, dated technology?
So yeah, I mean the current, the new release of hardware, the PS4, the Xbox One, it does appear to be a bit behind what could currently go into that machine. So it feels like they're kind of selling dumbed down consoles where they could have put much better equipment in there.
I don't know if I'd say that about the PS4, because everything I've played has been just ridiculously slick so far. The struggles that Xbox One are facing are probably tantamount. I mean, people are very quick to forget that when it was the other way around, PS3 was the console that was incredibly difficult to do, and every time you got a Digital Foundry article on Eurogame, it was always the Xbox 360 version's better, and now it's the other way around. PlayStation learned their lesson. But the problem is, consoles can always have better technology in them. They can always do that, but it's always about stability and cost effectiveness. If you're going to be mass producing something that's got to last X number of years and has gradually got to kind of depreciate in manufacture value and can ultimately depreciate in retail value as well, you've got to use kind of established, stable, reliable, cheaper technology. The media and so on and so forth are kind of culpable of a degree of bringing the kind of debate of whether we're being undersold to prominence kind of artificially, because whether games were displayed in a certain resolution, etc., at a certain frame rate, just weren't considerations, not even 5 years ago. And now it's suddenly overtaking the actual quality of the games. I mean, let's face it, neither console has really anything that makes them worthwhile. Titanfall, arguably, but even that feels like a half-done game. My big problem with both consoles at the moment is that I'm playing my 360 and my PS3 and my PS Vita far more than I'm playing either of those consoles right now. You're getting stuff like Infamous Second Son, which has arrived in this, this is the system seller. No, it's not. It's
that's a purely content-driven decision.
It's a deeply shallow, but very, very beautiful game. The kind of game you expect to come out at this stage of a new hardware generation. Let's start talking at the end of this year, maybe early next year, and we'll
I'll give you a copy of Thief. after 8.
I believe that's in the Humble Bundle right now, isn't it? You've got an EDOS sale in the Humble Bundle with Thief. I think you have.
Do you have the Morpheus version of Thief? Then I might be interested. Okay.
We'll go on to that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, similar kind of situation. I spent 3 days cabling my lounge for my new consoles, and I've probably just watched Netflix, mainly on them. It still creeps me out that someone else will come in the room while I'm watching Netflix and be like, oh, hello, and say their name, and you're a bit like, yeah, I don't know. I'm still a little bit suspicious. But yeah, I'm still playing my 360 more than... But I suppose that's quite natural, I guess, at the beginning of sort of a cycle. There's not going to be anything super duper exciting yet. I'm just sad about The Witcher 3 to play it now. At the end.
Haitham, you got any thoughts?
I mean, for me, the PS4 looks awesome. It just looks great, and I think as a console, as a piece of tech, it's fast, quick. I mean, GPUs are pretty awesome. I mean, I think I've read just from memory now, it's like 8 or 10 times quicker than the PS3. But to be honest with you, for me, it really comes down to the content, and I'm still firing up my Xbox 360. That's just how it is. I mean, we've got them, we've got them in our offices. Am I going over there and thinking, I'll fire up the PS4 and the Xbox One and play to my heart's content? I'm not really doing that at the moment. Maybe when Halo 5 comes out, possibly I'll go and play a lot more. But no, I mean, really, PS4 looks awesome. I mean, it really does.
Yeah, and similarly, my interests are kind of in content, really. I think the Science Museum collects kind of, the physical consoles, and I don't think we will start doing that, actually. I think we'll just be focusing on the games themselves, whether they're, on a physical realm or in the kind of digital. So I've less been kind of concentrating on that, actually, more of the kind of great game and maybe PC-based, actually.
So more to do with software nowadays then?
Yeah.
What does everyone think about Nintendo then? So they've had a rough time recently. What do you think is next up their sleeve?
I bleed Nintendo, effectively. But even I would say that if they were to try and release another console now, they'd be idiots. They have the most successful handheld on the market. They have a mass reserve of cash that people always seem to forget about, dating back from the Game Boy, effectively, and the NES. This is a company that has money to burn, and they can afford... as a war chest, absolutely. You've seen from failures with the GameCube, etc. They've always got something up their sleeve. And there's now rumours this quality of life products, a standalone, health game only console kind of thing. Again, bad idea. I think
what they've Wii Fit sort of thing, is it?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I think the big failing with the Wii U is that they failed to identify that the Wii was in effect kind of Binatone Mark II, the Pong playing machine that all the family gathered around back then. That's what the Wii was. People bought Wii Sports and they got Wii Fit, and then they propped up their balance boards and never went back to it again. It had a terrible attach rate, and they're the kind of facts that they should have been paying attention to, not the fact that they'd sold so many consoles. Well, how many people bought anything? Well, jack all. And now they're trying to play on past glories by like, oh, now we've released Wii Sports HD, etc., etc. And it's like, well, that makes me as a Nintendo fan like deeply sad, because they have flashes of genius still, and you think, I still need a Nintendo console in my household because I'm going to get a Super Mario 3D World every year. I'm going to have to wait a year till there's something essential. I've got Bayonetta 2 coming up, something that makes it essential.
So I bought a Wii from eBay recently, secondhand, purely so I could download Zelda: A Link to the Past through the Retro Store. Not so I could use any of the newfangled software, but purely so I could play a game from the 90s on that Wii. And then discovered the new 3DS game, Zelda. What's the title?
Link Between Worlds.
Link Between Worlds is pretty much the same game.
And it's phenomenal.
It's a fantastic game. But yeah, I've yet to really play the Wii at all for its intended purpose.
So it's a Wii U you bought, or a Wii?
A Wii, yeah.
The only good game on the Wii is House of the Dead Overkill with a hand cannon. Just so you know. That's brilliant.
Okay, that's the only good game on the Wii?
Only good game.
Not Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, or Xenoblade, or... Yeah, okay.
No, just that one.
Told.
Right. Well, I think the final thing we want to talk about tonight is the big news that everyone's been thinking about this week, which is
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Well,
conscious uncoupling.
We do have her head in a box backstage. Actually.
Oh, I'd like to see that.
Obviously, the Facebook Oculus buyout. It's a big topic. obviously there's not a hell of a lot of information around it yet, but there's been a bit of an outcry. So obviously Kickstarter backers who got on board very early and put money into this are now a bit upset that they've essentially funded Oculus to go on a path to a Facebook buyout, and they don't like Facebook. So
You sort of like kind of wish that they. I mean, Kickstarter was one of those kind of like really weird places where sort of it just feels a bit like the Wild West in some ways. But you would sort of think if you were a really early adopter, and bearing in mind all the support that Oculus got, that you get like, I don't know, some money back, just being like, thank you, you're awesome, you made this happen, here, have this thing of money. I think that'd be cool. I mean, there's enough money there to do that. But also, yeah, I don't know, anything, Facebook is just awful. It's just the worst thing in the world. And I begrudgingly use it just to, be aware of things.
What's 2 million? 0.1? Because
It's
that's how
2
much
billion.
that's like 0.1% of now what they've been bought
2 billion.
it was a B.
for. Yeah, so I'm saying it's a 2 million, which is what people invested in
Oh, yeah,
Kickstarter.
sorry, yeah.
They can afford to basically dish back 0.1% of what they're now worth.
Are we just going to start having the whole joke online? Obviously, was that like you're going to be playing like an Oculus game, and there's going to be some sort of like targeted ads for dieting or weight loss. Like
So Dan did a
midway through.
fantastic short video. We'll try and play it if possible. Yeah, we'll.
It's effectively that,
Oh, right.
but as a fictional future that will never ever actually happen. At least I bloody hope not. But yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of it has to boil down to divorcing Facebook, the evil data gathering, cat photo sharing website, and Facebook, the kind of company at large, and the things that Facebook are doing, aside from devouring companies whole like Galactus. But it's like a big purple helmet. Oh, that sounded wrong, didn't it? No. But the fact that they're also making kind of big strides in rapid application development and open source computing and making it, energy efficient servers and things like this. Things that actually are quite sympathetic to the Oculus model. I think there's a fear that they're going to close the platform and demand that certain apps and games have to go through a certain thing in order to be published. I'm not entirely sold on that yet. I think they may actually allow it to remain kind of as open source as it currently is.
Everyone outcried when they bought Instagram, right? Everyone's like, I'm going off Instagram. They're gonna fuck it up. They're gonna change it too much. They didn't do anything. I mean, it's not in their interest to tinker around too much, because that will affect their other future purchases, won't it? If they are saying to people, we're not going to change you, and then they do, and then they're going to try and bind someone else, that new party is going to say, no, you lied, you're going to do it again. So I think it's within their interest not to.
Yeah, they're going to do it with WhatsApp as well. So that's fine. I mean, what they've done there in both cases is they've identified that they've kind of failed in the mobile space. Facebook phones didn't. They just went, they completely tanked. So they've picked up the two. It's basically they're in that unfortunate position that when they failed horribly, they just then ingest someone who's done it right.
Resale therapy.
They're just placing bets at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it is. I mean, they've got the money to place those bets. I mean, WhatsApp, I couldn't believe it when I woke up and saw 19 bajillion. I mean, it just doesn't compute, to be honest with you.
But I think it was more of a kind of nasty reminder that, consumerism and kind of capitalism makes money, and I think it's more the heartbreak with Kickstarter. People kind of backing the underdogs who need their companies, to have kind of seed funding, and I think that's where the heartbreak is. And then of course you see how much Facebook is worth, and you think, oh God,
it's like how
really
something
give my
so
money to
pure
them?
could be tainted in a way, I suppose.
I just think we all get a bit carried away with Kickstarter, and sometimes this is the kind of reality. It's just
on another subject
capitalism.
with the Oculus Rift, I only you have tried it. You've got one here, right?
Yeah, we've got one at the back there. There'll probably be a queue, but there is one at the
2
back
billion.
there.
I mean,
Everyone take £10.
make sure you got sick bags by the side of the.
We'll get a
because
bucket, yeah.
I thought brilliant. When I saw the Oculus Rift and Morpheus, I was like, wow, the Morpheus looks fantastic. I mean, they unveiled it.
Proper go on it.
Didn't get a go of it. I
Just
saw
to
it.
look at it.
It's anything Sony does looks sexy. You know what I mean? It's got
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sexy tech thing about it, and you're sort of thinking, oh, that's going to be awesome.
That's
and
the
then,
noise,
and
isn't
then working, you worked your head through the games, and I mean, you mentioned Thief. I was talking to the general manager who'd been working on Thief with Morpheus, and my God, I mean, he took me to another place with all these options for the Oculus Rift, but 15 minutes. No, not even that. I must have been 6 or 7 minutes with the Oculus Rift, and I felt really ill.
Oh, I just
It's a shame, you know. I don't want it to do that.
I don't know. I think it's one of those things with virtual reality that I don't know. Like, you know, they bring out like curved TVs, and you're a bit like, I'm not going to do that. It's not really worth it. You know, spending that money, and you know, something like
I didn't get the point of the curved TV.
you get like a slightly better like peripheral vision or something, but like
IMAX.
that much is rubbish. But I ended up getting. I did on Sky News actually one week. I tend to do like the Friday slot, which is this chap called Stephen Dixon, who's very lovely, but just him and Gillian just do not game. This is constant battle to like try and get them to understand why it's so great. And I actually got him to play Eve Valkyrie live on the show, which was brilliant. Mainly because it's like watching that old granny video on YouTube. In the end, I just had to do like an entire soliloquy to camera on my own because he was just going like, wow, wow, like the whole time. And was so excited about it afterwards. And one of the chat from like CCP was there, and he was just like, oh, we need to get one of these. And it was so nice to see someone he's not anti-gaming. He just doesn't get it and doesn't understand why people.
That's the
want to
game
do
they
it.
had at
Yeah.
GDC
Yeah.
with the Oculus Rift.
Yeah, Eve Valkyrie.
It was awesome.
It's just incredible.
It's just, I mean, sitting in that, you know, I'm
Did
sitting
you see
in...
like the crack in the cockpit, and there's like dust on
it was
the
brilliant.
screen?
It's just, yeah, I mean, I'm sold.
Wait,
I
this was
just
on
don't want to be sick.
this is on the Rift or the
Yeah.
Morpheus?
I was on the Rift, but
Yeah.
I mean, you're sitting in a spacecraft about to take off, and you know, you can see your legs, you can
that's
look
the
over your
weirdest
shoulder.
bit, seeing your own legs.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, these are thinner than mine.
But you know, it's great. Just
If
looking around the
only.
cockpit, and then you're sort of, you know, darted out, sort of Battlestar Galactica style, and.
But it wasn't that long ago where people were saying, yeah, but you can just move forward and go down the ski jump.
Yeah.
And then, and you can do yoga and it's up on the cupboard.
And you punched.
I don't know, I'm a bit
you
skeptical.
punched your grandmother and a
Again.
couple of people in the living room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that it will. I don't know. I think it.
You're not sold on it. Yeah?
I
It's
just
a
think
big
it'll
enough
take a
jump.
while, which is fine. You know,
Yeah.
and of course, the Wii and Kinects have had a huge impact on the way kind of people interact with games. But I don't know. I'm a bit kind of. I imagine it on the top of a cupboard somewhere.
I think the important thing is that whereas the Wiimote initially sold on account of the Wiimote and the control, there were very few games that took proper advantage of it after that. And you know, from my perspective, like I was about to say gamer, boo. From my perspective, you know, the greatest games are the ones that kind of shunned that control by and large, which is like the Mario Galaxy 2s and things like that. Although Skyward Sword is very good. And with Connect and Move, again, it was because they lacked the software support to do that, because it was a completely new...
I lacked the living room space.
And yeah, I mean, because the Kinect was deeply intrusive as a piece of kit in a British living room, you know, typical British-sized living room. The thing that Oculus and Morpheus have in their favour is that it's much more readily adaptable to existing game genres. Obviously, the first person being the main one, but that means at least two of the most popular genres in the world are already going to take on a completely new aspect at no detriment to the control scheme, which is the problem with motion control, and that's always been the thing. It's always a bit, you know, fuzzy. But you can still sit there with a controller or a steering wheel or whatever. You can still play Call of Duty with the old pad. You can still do all of that. None of that has changed. The input method hasn't changed. It's just your view of ingesting that content visually has changed. And I think that's the key differentiator. You're going to be able to get the same kind of deep experiences, but just in a completely different way of being presented.
It's like a big enough, exciting jump. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I don't know how quickly, you know, it will all happen and everyone will have it. But I went to like one of the tech demos originally at E3 last year, and it was like this kind of like snowy Skyrim like castle that you're standing outside, and you like look up and there's all the snowflakes falling down, and then you go in and there's this like lava lord that's sort of like made of plates of lava, and he stands up. He doesn't actually do anything, but it was just that thing of standing next to him, and he stands up and he towers above you. He's almost as big as this room in perspective-wise, and you just feel so intimidated by his size. And you think to yourself, oh my God, if I was to play something like Skyrim or to like join up with a team of friends playing Borderlands and you've got to kill this huge thing, you forget how like the perspective of size makes such a difference to how you feel. Admittedly, the height setting was a bit weird because it was basically my face was just right at his crotch. I did give them notes because it was a bit weird because it was just there. But yeah, it's just one of those like amazingly fantastic things that you sort of forget about when you kind of sit back from your TV and just, yeah, I think I'm excited. I'm really excited about virtual reality. I think it's that thing we've all been kind of dreaming of. We used to watch Tomorrow's World, and we all know it was a bunch of lies. None of that stuff ever happened. Yeah, it was just rubbish. And finally, it feels like maybe they got one. Just one, right.
But you still feel sick.
Well, that was it.
That's all right.
I think that's actually the biggest challenge now is practicality and comfort.
Yep.
Wearing these things. The Oculus is very front heavy at the moment. From what I've read about the Morpheus, they've actually put some of the weight and cushioning on the top of your head and made sure it's a bit more evenly laid out there. But yeah, it's the question of latency and whether the movement of your head is a one-to-one match for what's happening on screen. That's the only way you're really going to be able to eliminate.
I mean, for me right now, it's I'm about to say game sitting down. You know, racing cars, awesome. I mean, I was just talking to one of the producers in Montreal, and he was saying, you drive your car, that's awesome. You know, you're sitting down, you pull the car over, you get out the car, you walk around the car, you stand back and look at the car. Now, I'm thinking, that's pretty cool. I mean, it is, right? And then you're back in the car and you go driving. And then you're driving with your mates who that I can absolutely see. But then you take some of the other games, I mean, I'm going to struggle with, Tomb Raider and Lara Croft running around an island with a bow and arrow. I mean, it sounds great, but standing up in my living room, I'm going to smash the place up and fall out the window.
You need to get rid of your ornaments, basically,
Yeah.
now. Declutter your lounge.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, those things are mental. I mean, do you not think that that sometimes... I mean, imagine if you were, like, the first time you'd ever been in a car, like, you tend to get sick. Do you think it's just that maybe, like, after you've used it for a while,
You just need to get
you'll
used to
kind
it,
of get
maybe, yeah.
used to it?
Or a
in that
3D
same way, like, if
film.
you're on a boat and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, God, I feel sick, and then you have to keep telling yourself you're on a boat so you don't feel sick. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
I suppose time will tell. Well, that sort of wraps it up, really. Before we sort of close, I'd just like to ask each of you what you're most looking forward to in terms of gaming. What's coming up?
I guess, yeah, for me, it's got to be virtual reality. The Witcher 3, I did mention that, I think, several times before. Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty much it, really, for me.
I think for someone who's complaining so much about Nintendo, I'm looking forward to X, Super Smash Brothers, Mario Kart 8, Bayonetta 2. So basically every exclusive on the Wii U will be incredible.
Oh, The Evil Within.
Oh, that's the other one
I
I've
wanna
got, The
play
Evil
that.
Within, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be
Shinji
messed
Mikami
up.
doing a straight-up horror again.
It's gonna be
Should be
brilliant.
incredible.
I'm gonna suck at it.
And what else did I mention earlier? Alien Isolation as well.
That does sound good. Yeah.
I'm going to be boring, Halo 5.
Oh.
I'm going to be even more boring and say I'm really looking forward to working on this research project at the museum. So actually bringing games into the museum. So we're starting an AHRC-funded project in 3 or 4 weeks' time. So it's the first with Abate. So it's the first kind of proper workshop. So we're starting it really, really soon. That's what I'm kind of most excited about, is really helping to describe the process of games design.
Awesome. And for me, it's probably going to be the next episode of The Wolf Among Us. And
Oh, Arkham Knight as well.
I wasn't a big fan of the last Batman game. Sorry, Haitham. But no, it's not really my thing, I don't think.
You're Batman.
Watch Dogs as well. Looking forward to
What's wrong
that.
with being Batman?
Right, so I think Paul is going to come up and say a few closing remarks from Internet. While he's making his way up here, just to remind you, we've got free drinks after the end of this. Please have a go on the Doom piano, the Oculus Rift with Pascal at the back. We've got the Nexus stage, I believe it's called, in the corner there. You can connect using your iPhone or Android phone with the instructions on the screen over there. And don't forget, outside, we've got the LHS bike shed, which is a bit of a... It's hard to explain. It's a bit of a simulator. There we go. Anyway, Paul.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I'm conscious that this is massively overrun, so I'm going to be very quick. But yes, my name's Paul. I work for Internap, the second sponsor here. I believe we're responsible for the free bar this evening, and the bar looks decisively empty at the moment, so I'm sure you're all itching to get back. Essentially, somebody asked me earlier, what does Internap do? I think Rich from Interxion described us as AWS, but better. I'd take that, considering their market share, but in all seriousness, we've been working with many gaming companies for several years. In terms of housing the content, we host the content and we distribute the content. And we've worked with many gaming companies. Square Enix here, Haitham is one of our customers, hopefully a happy customer. CCP Games in terms of EVE Online and Movie Star Planet, High Res. So tons of experience in terms of hosting the content, and we'd very much like to hear about your infrastructure challenges this evening over a couple of beers. Thank you very much.
Cool. Again, thank you, Interaction, thank you, Internap. Thanks to our amazing panel tonight. Give it up for the panel, guys. And thank all of you for coming along. I hope you stick around, have a beer, and play with us. Thank you. Thank you so much.